The shuttle carrying Ambassador docked at the massive orbital station floating above. He had made this journey 47 times in his career, and each visit left him more frustrated than the last. Today would be different. Today would be the last time. He walked through the corridor designed to make human visitors feel small. The ceiling stretched up 30 meters, built for species twice the height of any human. The temperature was kept just cold enough to be uncomfortable. Every detail of this place was meant to remind visitors of their place in the galactic order, had tolerated it for decades. Not anymore. The council chamber was already full when he entered. Representatives from 200 species filled the tiered seating that rose up like an amphitheater. At the center sat the High Council, 7 species that had ruled galactic affairs for thousands of years. High Counselor of the Dominion sat in the highest seat, looking down at everyone else with those strange triple eyes that never seemed to blink. Took his place in the petitioner's circle at the bottom of the chamber. That was what they called it, the petitioner's circle, not the speaker's platform or the representative's podium. After 200 years of human presence in galactic space, Earth still had to petition for the right to be heard. Spoke in the trade language, his voice amplified by technology that made it echo off every surface. The human delegation may present its response to the Council's requirements. Requirements, not proposals or requests. Requirements. Felt something cold settle in his chest. He had spent the entire journey trying to find words that would make the Council understand. Now he realized they would never understand. They did not want to. The Council has demanded that humanity surrender 70% of its agricultural output, began. His voice was steady despite the anger burning inside him. You claim this is necessary to feed the expansion into the outer reaches, but humanity has reviewed the numbers. The Empire has sufficient resources to feed its own population. They simply prefer to take ours rather than use their own. A hiss came from the ambassador, a massive reptilian creature that filled 3 seats. How dare a client species question the needs of the Empire? Continued as if the interruption had not happened. The Council has also demanded that humanity surrender all patents and rights to our faster-than-light drive technology. Technology that human scientists developed without any Council assistance. You claim this is for the benefit of all species, but the truth is simpler. You want to control it so humanity cannot profit from its own innovation. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Several species shifted in their seats. The smaller delegations, the ones that also suffered under Council control, were listening carefully. And finally, said, the Council has once again humanity's petition for full voting rights. After 2 centuries of contributions to galactic civilization, we are still classified as observers. We can watch, we can listen, but we cannot vote on matters that directly affect our survival. High Counselor leaned forward. Young species must earn the right to full participation. Humanity has not demonstrated sufficient maturity or stability. In another century, perhaps 2, the Council will reconsider. That was when something broke inside. Another century, another 2 centuries. It would never end. The Council would always find another excuse, another reason why humanity was not ready. Because the truth was that they did not want humanity to be ready. They wanted servants, not equals. Then humanity's answer is no, said quietly. The chamber fell silent. Triple eyes focused entirely on the human ambassador. Explain yourself. No, we will not surrender our food production. No, we will not give away our technology. And no, we will not accept another century of second-class status. Pulled a data pad from his jacket and held it up. Effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. All treaties are void. All trade agreements are terminated. All embassies will close within 30 days. The silence lasted for exactly 3 seconds. Then the chamber erupted. Dozens of species began shouting at once. The ambassador rose to its full height, towering over its section of the seating. The representative's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among its kind. Even the smaller delegations seemed shocked, though noticed that several looked more hopeful than horrified. Did not shout. He simply waited until the noise died down, then spoke with absolute certainty. Humanity will not survive this decision. You have no allies. You have no military capable of defending your colonies. You have no economy that can function without council trade networks. Within 1 year, you will return to us begging for readmission on whatever terms we offer. The ambassador added its own threat. Your colonies will starve. Your ships will be docking at every civilized port. Your people will realize that their leaders have condemned them to isolation and suffering. Looked at each member of the High Council in turn. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps humanity will fail, but we will fail on our own terms as free people rather than succeed as your servants. He paused, then added, and I think you know something that frightens you. I think you know that we will not fail. He turned to leave. Behind him, his voice echoed through the chamber. This session is concluded. The human petition is, when humanity returns seeking mercy, the council will remember this insult. Walked back through those enormous corridors, past the too high ceilings and the deliberately uncomfortable temperature. He felt lighter with each step. For the first time in his entire career, he had told the truth without diplomatic language or careful phrasing. He had said what needed to be said. His shuttle pilot, a young woman named, saw his expression when he returned. How did it go, Ambassador? We just declared independence, said. Contact Earth. Tell them it is done. His eyes went wide, but she nodded and began working her console. As the shuttle detached from the station and turned toward the nearest jump point, looked back at the massive structure. Somewhere inside, the Galaxy Council was already planning how to make humanity suffer for this defiance. Let them plan. Humanity had spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment. The Council thought they were dealing with the same desperate species that had first begged for recognition. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The galaxy was about to change, and it would never be the same again. 3 months passed since humanity walked away from the Galaxy Council, sat in his private office on the Council's central station, waiting for the message he knew must come. Any day now, Earth would transmit their surrender. They would apologize for their emotional outburst and beg to be under any terms the Council offered. The message did come, but it was not what expected. Chairwoman appeared on every public broadcast channel in the galaxy simultaneously. She stood in front of a massive window showing Earth floating behind her, beautiful and blue, and completely unconcerned with the Council's threats. This is a message to all species in the galaxy, she began. Her voice was calm and professional. Humanity is officially closed for business with the Galaxy Council and all species that remain under Council authority. All non-human vessels currently in human space have 72 hours to depart. After that deadline, any unauthorized ship will be escorted out. Any ship that refuses escort will be destroyed. Watched the broadcast with growing disbelief. Destroyed. Humanity had barely enough military ships to patrol their own territory. This was an empty threat from a desperate species. It had to be. Furthermore, continued, all human colonies, stations, and vessels are hereby under the protection of Earth's unified defense network. Any species wishing to establish diplomatic or trade relations with humanity must apply through official channels and agree to treaties based on mutual respect and equal standing. The broadcast ended, sat in silence for a long moment, then activated his communication system. Assemble the enforcement fleet, he ordered. It is time to remind humanity of reality. The enforcement fleet was massive, 12,000 warships from 40 different species, all united under Council command. Fleet Commander, a career military officer from the Dominion, led the armada personally. He had fought in 12 wars and suppressed twice as many rebellions. This would be the easiest assignment of his career. The fleet arrived at the outer markers of human territory 6 weeks after its broadcast, expected to find panicked defense forces and desperate transmissions begging for mercy. Instead, his sensor officer reported something strange. "Commander, the human colonies are not responding to hails." "They are afraid," said confidently. "Continue forward." But it was not fear. As the fleet moved deeper into human space, they found colony after colony completely dark, not destroyed. The structures were intact, the stations were operational, but there were no life signs, no ships in dock, no activity at all. "Where are they?" Communications officer asked. Was young for a barely 50 years old, and this was her first major deployment. "Did they evacuate?" "Impossible," replied. "To evacuate this many people would require years of preparation. We would have detected the ship movements." But even as he said it, doubt crept into his mind. What if humanity had been preparing for much longer than anyone realized? What if they had planned this withdrawal years in advance? The fleet continued toward the heart of human territory, toward Earth itself. Sensor officer suddenly straightened in his seat. "Commander, I am detecting massive energy signatures ahead. Multiple signatures. I have never seen readings like this." "Show me," ordered. The tactical display updated, and felt something he had not experienced in decades of military service: fear. Earth's solar system was no longer the modest collection of colonies and defense stations that the Council's last survey had recorded. Someone had transformed it into a fortress. Earth itself was surrounded by a defensive grid that made the Council's most advanced military installations look primitive. The energy output from those grid points suggested weapons capable of destroying capital ships with single shots. Luna was not a simple mining colony anymore. The entire moon had been converted into a weapons platform. Hundreds of launch bays dotted the surface. Thousands of automated defense drones filled the space between Earth and its satellite. Mars hosted construction yards that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Ships were being built there, and they did not match any design in the Council's databases. They were sleek and angular, covered in armor plating that sensors could not identify. Some of them were already active, moving in precise formations that spoke of advanced tactical programming. Hal whispered, "How did they do all this in 3 months?" They had not done it in 3 months, realized. This was years of work. Decades, possibly. Humanity had been building this in secret while the Council believed they were keeping Earth weak and dependent. All those restrictions on human technology and military development had been ignored. Humanity had simply hidden their progress. A communication channel opened. Captain Haywan's face appeared on screen. She wore the uniform of Earth's Defense Force, and her expression was completely calm. "Fleet Commander," she said, "your fleet is currently in violation of human sovereign space. You have 24 hours to withdraw beyond the territorial markers. After that deadline, we will consider your presence an act of war." Felt anger surge through him. You cannot threaten a Council enforcement fleet. You do not have the military capacity to back up such threats. Haywan smiled slightly. It was not a warm smile. "Test that theory if you wish, but I strongly suggest you withdraw while you still can." Cut the channel and turned to his tactical officer. "Analysis. Can we defeat their defenses?" The tactical officer studied his screens for several minutes. His expression grew more troubled with each passing second. "Unknown, Commander. Their weapons technology is beyond our current understanding. The energy signatures suggest destructive capability far exceeding our shields. The automated defense network alone represents thousands of targets that can react faster than any living crew. And those new ship designs." He trailed off. "What about their ships?" demanded. "I cannot get clear sensor readings, Commander. Something is interfering with our scans. But based on what I can detect, they are faster and more maneuverable than anything we have. And I am detecting power signatures that suggest weapons we have no defense against." stared at the tactical display. His orders from the council were clear: remind humanity of their place, use force if necessary, show them that defying the council leads only to destruction. But looking at those defenses, looking at those mysterious ships, made a decision that would define the rest of his career. He opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships prepare to withdraw. We are leaving human space immediately. Commander sounded shocked. The council ordered us to. The council ordered me to assess the situation and respond appropriately, interrupted. I have assessed. Fighting here would result in catastrophic losses for no strategic gain. We withdraw. The enforcement fleet turned and began its long journey back to Council space. Behind them, Earth's defenses remained active but did not fire. Humanity had made their point. They did not need to destroy the fleet. They only needed to make it clear that they could. On the bridge of Earth's flagship, Captain HFY watched the Council fleet retreat. Her second officer, a man named Yang, exhaled slowly. They are leaving, he said. I thought we would have to fight. They are smart enough to recognize a losing battle, HFY replied. The question is whether the Council will be smart enough to accept reality. She looked at the tactical display showing Earth's defenses. Humanity had spent 200 years under Council restrictions, unable to develop their full potential. The Council had thought they were keeping humanity weak. Instead, they had only motivated humanity to work harder, to innovate faster, to prepare for the day when they would finally stand on their own. That day had arrived, and the galaxy was about to learn what humanity could accomplish when no one was holding them back. News of the enforcement fleet's retreat spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds in 10,000 stations, people gathered around communication screens and asked the same questions. How did humanity defeat the Council? What happened in that solar system? And most importantly, what happened next? The economic impact struck first and struck hard. Director Bora sat in her office on Mars, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. The Council was trying to maintain order, but reality did not care about their authority. Humanity had controlled 62% of the galaxy's pharmaceutical production, medicines that treated everything from simple infections to plague-level diseases. Without those medicines, entire populations were at risk. The Dominion could manufacture their own antibiotics, but smaller species depended entirely on human production. And now that production was gone. Human agricultural techniques had transformed 40 systems from barely habitable to productive farmland. Those worlds could feed themselves now, but they could not feed the neighboring systems that had come to rely on that surplus. Food shortages were being reported across the outer territories. Human fusion reactor designs powered thousands of stations and cities. The technology was public knowledge, but the manufacturing process required precision that most species had not bothered to master. Why learn to make reactors when you could simply buy them from humanity? Now those species faced energy crises that threatened to collapse their infrastructure. Bora reviewed the numbers with cold satisfaction. The Council had convinced itself that humanity needed them. They were discovering the truth was exactly the opposite. The first species to break ranks was the Confederation. There was suffering from a plague that had killed 15 million people in the past month alone. Human antibiotics could stop it. Without those antibiotics, the death toll would reach billions within a year. The ambassador, an elderly diplomat named, arrived at the neutral station where Ambassador Yang waited for him. Looked exhausted. His people were dying, and the Council had forbidden any species from negotiating with humanity. "We need your help," said simply. There was no pride in his voice, only desperation. "My people are dying. The Council says we must wait for them to find an alternative solution, but there is no alternative. Only human medicine can save us." Yang had his orders from Earth. They were clear and non-negotiable. Humanity is willing to provide the medicine you need, but not as charity, not as a favor you must someday repay. We will help you as equals or not at all." "What are your terms?" asked. "Full diplomatic recognition, fair trade agreements based on mutual benefit, and a mutual defense pact. If you are attacked, humanity will defend you. If we are attacked, you will stand with us." Yang paused. "And you must leave the Galaxy Council." Closed his eyes. Leaving the council meant losing access to trade networks that had existed for thousands of years. It meant risking council military action. It meant standing against powers that had ruled the galaxy since before they had developed space flight. But his people were dying. "We agree," said. "Send us the medicine." Within hours, human medical ships were en route to space. Within days, the plague was contained. Within weeks, the Confederation formally from the Galaxy Council and established an embassy on Mars. High Counselor was furious. He called an emergency session and demanded that they be sanctioned and blockaded. "They have violated council law. They have betrayed their oaths. They must be punished." But when the vote was called, something unprecedented happened. 17 species abstained. They did not vote to support the sanctions. They simply refused to participate in the vote at all. The motion failed. For the first time in recorded history, the Council could not enforce its will on a member species. The abstentions told everything he needed to know. Those 17 species were watching them carefully. If they prospered outside the Council, if they found security and success in alliance with humanity, then others would follow. More species began making the journey to human space. Some came in secret, hiding their shuttles among commercial traffic. Others came openly, daring the Council to stop them. All of them asked for the same thing: a fair deal. A mining consortium offered rare minerals in exchange for fusion reactor technology. A scientific collective offered their research data in exchange for access to human medical advances. A small empire on the galactic edge offered territorial concessions in exchange for defensive weapons technology. Each time humanity's answer was the same: equal partnership or nothing, no subservience, no second-class status. Either they dealt with humanity as peers or they did not deal at all. Back on Earth, Director Bora oversaw the transformation that was reshaping human civilization. Without council restrictions, human innovation exploded. Scientists who had been forced to hide their research now worked openly. Engineers who had been limited in what they could build now pushed the boundaries of what was possible. New drive systems that did not rely on the Council's control. Weapons that made Council warships look like antiques. Medical technology that could extend by decades. Manufacturing processes that could build a station in weeks instead of years. Humanity had spent 2 centuries being held back by species that feared what humans might become. Now, freed from those restrictions, humans were discovering their own potential, and it was vast. Captain Haywan walked through the construction yards on Mars, watching robots and human workers build ships that would have been impossible just months before. Each ship represented a technological leap that the Council had spent centuries trying to prevent. "How many?" she asked the yard supervisor. "We will complete 80 ships this month," the supervisor replied. "Next month, 100. The month after that, we should reach 150. The production rate keeps improving." Haywan did the math in her head. At that rate, humanity would have a fleet of over 1,000 advanced warships within a year. In 2 years, they could match the Council's entire military force. In 3 years, they could surpass it. "The Council will not allow this," she said quietly. "Then the Council will have to stop us," the supervisor replied, "and I do not think they can." In his office on the Council's central station, reached the same conclusion. The carefully maintained power structure that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years was cracking. Species were defecting. Technology was spreading. Humanity's influence was growing with each passing day. He called another emergency session. This time, his proposal was simple and terrible: a full military assault on human space, not a show of force like the enforcement fleet. A real war aimed at destroying humanity's ability to threaten council authority. "If we do not act now," told the assembled representatives, "we will lose control entirely. In 1 year, humanity will be too strong to defeat. In 2 years, they will be the dominant military power in the galaxy. We must strike while we still can." The debate lasted for 3 days. Species argued for and against war. Some feared humanity's growing power. Others feared what war might unleash. But in the end, fear won. The vote passed. The Galaxy Council declared war on humanity. 70,000 warships began assembling in the outer territories. The largest military force in recorded galactic history, built from contributions by over 100 species. Its purpose was singular: eliminate the human threat before it grew beyond control. On Earth, Chairwoman received the declaration of war and read it carefully. Then she set it aside and activated the communication system that connected her to every human colony, every human station, every human ship in the galaxy. "They are coming," she said simply. "Prepare for war." The war did not begin with fleets and bombardments. It began with shadows and silence. Council operatives slipped into human space through hidden routes, carrying weapons designed to look like ordinary cargo. They targeted frontier colonies, places far from Earth's defensive grid where humans might be vulnerable. The first attack hit a mining station on the edge of human territory. Someone sabotaged the life support systems. 80 people died before emergency crews could restore oxygen. The second attack destroyed a communication relay, cutting off 3 colonies from the network. The third was a bomb on a civilian transport. 140 dead. The Council never claimed responsibility. They did not need to. Everyone knew who was behind the attacks, was trying to provoke humanity into a response that would justify the massive war fleet he was assembling. He wanted humans to strike first so the Council could claim they were acting in self-defense. Chairwoman refused to give him that justification. Instead of retaliating, she ordered human forces to withdraw from the frontier entirely. Every colony, every station, every outpost within 20 light-years of Council space was evacuated and abandoned. "Let them have empty territory," she told her advisors. "We will not waste lives defending space stations when the real war is coming." The real war arrived 3 months later. 70,000 warships jumped into human space simultaneously, appearing in 100 different systems at once. It was the largest military force in recorded galactic history, and it was committed to a single purpose: destroying humanity's ability to threaten the Council. Admiral Bin commanded Earth's defense forces from the bridge of the flagship Indomitable. She was young for such a position, barely 40 years old, but she had spent the last 6 months preparing for exactly this moment. Every simulation, every war game, every tactical scenario had led to this. The Council fleet pushed into human space, expecting fierce resistance at the border. Instead, they found nothing. The frontier systems were empty just as had ordered. No defenders, no battles, just automated defenses that struck and retreated, causing casualties but never committing to a real fight. Fleet Commander, once again leading Council forces, grew suspicious. "They are drawing us in," he told his officers. "They want us to overextend before they strike." He was absolutely right, but understanding the trap did not help him avoid it. His orders were clear: push forward regardless of casualties. Occupy human territory. Force humanity to defend their core worlds. So the Council fleet continued its advance, leaving a trail of destroyed automated defenses and disabled satellites behind it. Each light year cost them. Mines that did not register on sensors until it was too late. Drone swarms that overwhelmed point defense systems before self-destructing. Human ships that appeared from nowhere, struck fast, and vanished before the council could respond. "How are they moving like that?" the tactical officer demanded. "Their ships appear on sensors, then disappear, then reappear in completely different locations. It is not possible." But it was possible. Human scientists had developed quantum displacement drives in the months since withdrawing from the council. The drives allowed ships to shift position instantly within a limited radius. Not true teleportation, but close enough to make conventional tactics useless. The Council fleet lost 3,000 ships in the first 2 weeks, not to pitched battles, just to the constant harassment, the endless small attacks that picked away at their strength. Tried every countermeasure he could think of, but nothing worked against an enemy that could be anywhere at any time. Behind the advancing Council forces, something else was happening. The species that had allied with humanity were striking at Council supply lines. Convoys were destroyed. Bases were sabotaged. Communication networks were hacked. The Council's strength had always been its unity, and that unity was being systematically shattered. 17 species that had abstained from the war vote were now actively undermining the war effort. Not openly, not officially, but supplies meant for the front lines were delayed or lost. Intelligence was leaked to human forces. Whole sections of the Council's logistics network simply stopped functioning properly. Knew about the sabotage but could do nothing to stop it. He could not afford to fight a war on 2 fronts. So he ordered to push forward faster, to reach Earth before the supply situation became critical. The Council fleet continued its advance. Each day brought them closer to human core territory. Each day cost them hundreds more ships, but they were still 70,000 strong when they reached the line, the last major defensive position before Earth itself. Admiral Bin had concentrated humanity's entire fleet at. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier that humans could spare was positioned here. And they were joined by ships from the 17 species that had openly allied with humanity. It still was not enough. The human coalition numbered barely 8,000 ships against 70,000 Council warships. The numerical advantage was overwhelming. Looked at the tactical display and allowed himself to feel confident for the first time in months. This battle would end the war. He was wrong. The battle began at dawn on Station's arbitrary clock. The Council fleet advanced in perfect formation, their tactics refined over thousands of years of warfare. They expected the human coalition to meet them in traditional battle lines, to fight the kind of war that the Council always won. Instead, the entire human fleet vanished from sensors. For 3 seconds, his bridge was silent. Then every ship in the human coalition reappeared simultaneously, not where they had been but scattered throughout the Council formation. One moment the Council fleet was advancing in perfect order. The next moment, human ships were everywhere, firing at point-blank range into vulnerable sections of Council vessels. The quantum displacement drives had been a tactical surprise. Now they became a strategic nightmare. Human ships did not stay in one place long enough to be targeted. They would appear, fire, and teleport away before return fire could hit them. Traditional fleet tactics meant nothing when your enemy could ignore the concept of movement entirely. Council ships tried to adapt. They fired at empty space where they thought human ships would appear. They launched wide-area weapons hopping to catch ships mid-displacement. Nothing worked. The human ships moved according to patterns that computer prediction could not model because the patterns were not based on physics the Council understood. The battle lasted 3 days. At the end, the Council fleet retreated with nearly half its ships destroyed or disabled. The human coalition had lost less than 1,000 vessels. It was the most one-sided victory in modern galactic warfare. Sat on the bridge of his damaged flagship and stared at the casualty reports. 35,000 ships, hundreds of thousands of lives, and humanity had barely taken losses at all. The weapon technology he could understand, the tactics he could learn to counter, But the drives, those quantum displacement drives that let ships simply stop being in one place and start being in another, those he had no defense against. He opened a channel to, "High Counselor, the fleet cannot continue. We must withdraw." "Unacceptable," replied. "We cannot allow this war to end in defeat. Advance and—" Cut the channel. For the first time in his long military career, he directly disobeyed orders. "All ships," he broadcast across the fleet communication network, "withdraw to Council space. The war is over." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Bin watched the Council fleet retreat. Around her, the crew was celebrating their victory. But Bin did not celebrate. She looked at Captain Haywan, who commanded one of the Coalition's allied ships. "They will not forget this," Bin said quietly. "The Council will never forgive being defeated." "Then they should have treated us as equals from the beginning," Haywan replied. "They created this situation. We simply responded to it." The Council fleet jumped out of human space, leaving behind wreckage and defeat. The war that was supposed to restore Council dominance had instead proven that humanity could not only defend themselves, but defeat the greatest military force the galaxy had ever assembled. In his office, Receive's final report and finally understood the truth he had been denying for months. The age of Council dominance was over. Humanity had not just won a battle. They had shattered the illusion that the Council was invincible. The galaxy would never be the same. The vote of no confidence against High Counselor passed by a margin of 3-1. He had led the Council into a war they could not win, wasted tens of thousands of lives, and shattered the illusion of Council invincibility. Species that had never dared question Council authority now openly criticized his decisions. Even his own Dominion abandoned him. Did not rage or protest. He simply stood, gathered his documents, and walked out of the Council chamber. His era was over. The old way of governing the galaxy was finished. What came next, he did not know and no longer cared to discover. The emergency session that followed lasted for 2 weeks. 200 species tried to solve a problem that had no easy answer. The Council as it existed could not continue. Too many species had defected. Too much trust had been destroyed. But without the Council, what would replace it? Ambassador attended the session as an observer. Humanity did not trust the Council enough to fully participate yet. But he listened carefully as species argued about the future of galactic governance. Some wanted to restore the old system with minor reforms, give a few more species voting rights, reduce some of the more obvious restrictions, basically continue as before but with a friendlier appearance. Other species, especially the smaller ones who had suffered under Council dominance, wanted something completely different. Equal representation for everyone, democratic decision-making, no more hierarchy based on age or military power. The debate went in circles for days. Then Ambassador Yang, representing the human coalition, stood to speak. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew that whatever humanity proposed would shape the final decision. They had proven they could survive outside the Council. Whatever government emerged next would need their participation. "Humanity proposes the dissolution of the Galaxy Council," Yang said. His words fell like stones into still water. "The Council was built on principles that are no longer acceptable. Some species rule while others obey. Some species vote while others watch. Some species are considered mature enough for full participation while others are told to wait centuries for consideration." He paused, letting his words sink in. This must end completely, not reformed, not improved, ended. "What would replace it?" asked Ambassador of the "A galactic assembly built on different principles. Every species has an equal voice. Decisions require genuine consensus, not majority rule where the powerful outvote the weak. And most importantly, no species can claim authority over another species. Ever." The chamber erupted in argument. Some species supported the idea enthusiastically. Others insisted it would create chaos. How could 200 species with different needs and different capabilities all have equal say? How could anything get accomplished when everyone had to agree? It will be difficult, Yang acknowledged. Democracy is always difficult, but it is better than the alternative, and humanity will not participate in any galactic government that does not meet these standards. That settled the matter. Too many species now depended on human technology, human medicine, and human trade to risk driving them away. If humanity insisted on equality, then equality it would be. The vote to dissolve the Galaxy Council and establish a new galactic assembly passed by a wide margin. Even the former council members voted in favor, though several did so with obvious reluctance. They understood the reality. The old order was dead whether they accepted it or not. 6 months later, the inaugural session of the Galactic Assembly convened on Unity Station, a massive new structure built in neutral space between human and former council territory. Ambassador, now promoted to Secretary General of Human External Affairs, sat in the opening ceremony among representatives from 200 species. The Dominion's new ambassador, a younger official named who actually believed in the reforms, stood before the assembly. On behalf of the Dominion, I formally apologize to humanity for centuries of condescension, exploitation, and disrespect. We claim to guide you. The truth is we only held you back because we feared what you might become. It was a remarkable moment. The species that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years, apologizing to one of the youngest members of galactic civilization. Some traditionalists watched the broadcast with disgust, but most understood that was speaking necessary truth. Other species offered their own apologies. The Empire admitted they had used council authority to exploit smaller species. They acknowledged they had supported an unjust system because it benefited them. One by one, the old powers confessed their failures, accepted their apologies with grace. The past cannot be changed, but the future is unwritten. Let us write it together as equals. The galaxy began to rebuild. Humanity shared the technology they had developed during their isolation, but on fair terms that benefited everyone. The quantum displacement drives were offered to any species willing to sign mutual defense pacts. Medical advances were distributed freely to combat diseases. Agricultural techniques were taught to worlds struggling to feed their populations. The former council species discovered something surprising. Cooperation produced better results than domination. When species worked together as partners rather than as rulers and subjects, innovation accelerated. Problems were solved faster. Conflicts were resolved before they became wars. Not everything was perfect. There were still tensions. The Empire struggled to accept their reduced influence. Several smaller species used their newfound equality to settle old grudges. Debates in the assembly often lasted for weeks as hundreds of voices tried to reach consensus. But Director Bora, now heading the Department of Development, worked tirelessly to build bridges. When the nearly went to war over a territorial dispute, she mediated negotiations that satisfied both sides. When a plague threatened the outer colonies, she coordinated a response that drew on resources from 40 species. When tensions rose, she reminded everyone that they were stronger together than apart. Captain Haywan stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, watching ships from 100 species come and go. Her daughter, now 5 years old, pressed her face against the transparent hull and pointed at a massive vessel. "Mama, is that ship our friend?" Haywan smiled. "Yes, they are learning to be our friends." "What about that one?" Pointed at a cruiser. "Them too. And that one, a transport." "Everyone is learning to be friends. It takes time, but we are getting there." Thought about that for a moment. Why were they not friends before? It was a child's question, but it cut to the heart of everything that had happened. Why had species spent thousands of years treating each other as superiors and inferiors instead of as equals? Why had it taken a crisis to force them to recognize each other's dignity? Because people are afraid of change, Hay once said. The old way was comfortable for those in power. They did not want to risk losing what they had, even though the old way was unfair to everyone else. But they changed anyway, observed. Yes, because sometimes change is not optional. Sometimes you change or you break. On the assembly floor, Ambassador prepared to deliver the keynote speech for the one-year anniversary of the new order. He looked out at the representatives from 200 species and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Hope. 1 year ago, he began, humanity cut all ties with the Galaxy Council. We did it not because we wanted isolation, but because we demanded dignity. We refused to accept a system that treated us as perpetual children who needed guidance from our supposed betters. He paused, letting silence fill the chamber. Chaos followed, war followed, fear followed, but from that chaos came something the galaxy desperately needed, a chance to start over, a chance to build something better. The old council believed that some species were naturally suited to rule while others were naturally suited to obey. They believed that age granted wisdom and power granted authority. They were wrong. Every species in this chamber has something to contribute. Every voice deserves to be heard. Every perspective has value. This new system is messy. It is frustrating. Decisions take longer because we must find consensus instead of following orders. But it is worth the difficulty. Because for the first time in galactic history, we are building a civilization based on mutual respect rather than imposed hierarchy. Will there be conflicts? Yes. Will there be disagreements? Absolutely. Will we sometimes fail to find common ground? It is inevitable, but we will face these challenges together as equals, and we will find solutions that work for everyone rather than just the powerful. Humanity cut all ties with the Galaxy Council, and chaos followed. But from that chaos, we have created something better, something worth protecting, something worth building together. He sat down to applause that lasted for several minutes. Not all species were entirely happy with the new order, but even those who preferred the old ways understood that going back was impossible. The galaxy had changed, and despite the difficulties, most agreed the change was for the better. Years later, historians would look back at this period and identify it as the turning point in galactic civilization, the moment when rule by the strong gave way to partnership among equals, the moment when young species were no longer expected to prove themselves worthy of respect, but were granted that respect automatically. And it all began with humanity doing something that seemed suicidal at the time. They cut all ties with the Galaxy Council. They stood alone. They refused to compromise on their dignity. The galaxy would never forget that lesson, neither would humanity.